A new Ridley Scott movie? I have been summoned. Hi, I'm Lady Genevieve, and on my channel I talk about entertainment media. Today I'm going to be doing yet another source material video. For anyone who might be new here, I like to read source material of upcoming film adaptations. I talk about what's in the story, any early thoughts I have on the material, how that might be adapted, the creative talent involved, and then when the film is released, I will go and do a film review, which is the main thing that I do here on my channel. But I will also take that source material into consideration when talking about how the film has turned out in the final result. I checked this book out from the library. All of the books I've done source material videos on this year have been checked out from the library. If you don't have a library card, you should get one, because even if you don't use it often, by taking that first step of procuring a library card, you will help that library with its funding. And if you would like to read something, you get to do so for free in this global economy. That sounds like a gift to me. So The Dog Stars is a 2012 novel by Peter Heller. It is a post-apocalyptic story, and the film adaptation is directed by Ridley Scott. The ultimate diva, an icon who's been doing it for the girls for decades, Alien, Thelma and Louise, and of course many of the films in his recent output, including The Last Duel, House of Gucci, Napoleon. Yes, Napoleon. Do you know what Ridley Scott's Napoleon is? It's a story about how pathetic it is to be a warmongering, power-hungry freak, and that you would have been a whole lot happier if you had just stayed with your wife, whom you adore. All that power gained and lost, and after the dust has settled, what are you thinking about? Your wife, whom you will never be with again. Okay, Diva Ridley. Now, in doing quick internet searches, I've seen some describe Ridley Scott's adaptation as being a post-apocalyptic science fiction story. If you go back to 2024, Film Stories reported, in our conversation with Mr. Scott in September, however, another project came up which he hadn't, at least to our knowledge, talked about publicly before. Science fiction next, he said briskly. It's already written. When we tried to press for a bit more detail, he smilingly replied, no, but it's a good one. And then the more recent reports that came with the official announcements about The Dog Stars are reports that describe the film as post-apocalyptic, and Paul Mescal being the film's lead following his collaboration with Ridley Scott on Gladiator 2. Now, I will admit I would have loved to see Paul play the lead role of this, but alas, it was not meant to be, and now the protagonist is portrayed by Jacob Elordi. He just keeps popping up on here, doesn't he? I recently published a source material video on the upcoming Wuthering Heights adaptation, and I also reviewed Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. If you want the full sequential library for source material videos, we have The Running Man, which is a November release, The Housemaid, releasing in December, People We Meet on Vacation in January, Wuthering Heights in February, Reminders of Him in mid-March, and now The Dog Stars, which is listed for a March 27th release. I don't know if that science fiction label is accurate for Ridley Scott's film adaptation of the book. I will welcome whatever he wants to do with the story. This book, as it's written, will definitely require a fair bit of nips and tucks, because it's not the type of story that would work to just copy and paste into a film. A lot of what's in the pages are Higgs' wandering thoughts, which move from various memories to his reflections about life and grief and the state of the world, and vivid descriptions of nature. I'm not saying that that's bad, but what works in the print medium doesn't necessarily translate well into film without making the necessary changes that would make sense for a different medium. The book is divided into Book 1, Book 2, and Book 3. However, me telling you that they're called books might make you feel as though they're separate stories. In actuality, they're more like separations of 3 acts of one story. Book 1 has 6 chapters, Book 2 has 4 chapters, and Book 3 has 3 chapters. The book feels like something that could be useful for the actors, or mostly Jacob Elordi, because of how much of Higgs' interiority is spread all over the pages. If it ends up being a closer adaptation, if he wants to use the book as a tool that helps him to build his characterization of Higgs for the film, it offers more than enough material to do that. However, as it applies to me giving an overview of what the source material is, I'm going to gloss over quite a bit of Higgs' memories and other tangents his mind goes on, simply because I don't think that will translate well for a YouTube video that is introducing the source material as a stepping stone towards eventually discussing the film adaptation. Of course, if you have any curiosity about getting to learn more of those details, I would tell you to go check the book out from your local library and read it for yourself. The story's primary timeline, excluding the numerous flashbacks by way of memories, which are usually Higg's memories, unless it's another character sharing something with him about their own memories. This primary timeline begins many years after there was an outbreak that caused a significant portion of the population to become ill, and among those, a fair few of them passed away. You don't really learn until quite late in the book that the media was blaming this on wildlife outbreaks originating in the global south. They were saying New Delhi, among other things, mutation of a superbug, one of the ones they'd been watching for 2 decades, in the water supply and whatnot, combined with a bird flu. They called it the Africanized bird flu after the killer bees, but in actuality it more than likely originated at Livermore, the National Weapons Lab in the US. The rumor was that it was a simple transshipment, a courier on a military flight with a sample taking it to their friends in England. Supposedly the plane crashed in Brampton, but nobody will ever fully know.
Our friendship is built on our mutual distrust of England.
The story, though, is set in Colorado. Hig is a pilot, as in he knows how to fly, and he has an old plane that he uses to scout the area near where he is set up. His spot is an old airport hangar. It's him and an old man named Bangley, who is going to be played by Josh Brolin in the film adaptation. Beginning in Act 1, I know it's called Book 1, but I'm going to just call them Act 1, 2, and 3 because that makes more sense to me as a label. In Act 1, it's not all that eventful. It's mostly just building this world up for the reader, telling you about Hig and the place where he's set up, and this very weird relationship he has with Bangley. See, Hig is often worried that it's only a matter of time before Bangley is going to decide to kill him. Bangley is ex-military. He's very violent. If anyone is going to just show up where the two of them are set up, Bangley wants to immediately shoot them. Don't ask questions. It's the apocalypse. People are dangerous and violent. Don't give them a chance to do any damage. Hig is useful to Bangley because he has this plane and he can fly it. He'll go up in the air and have a look around to see if there are any people walking around that might eventually encroach upon their spot. There are a lot of world-building details in Act 1 about how these two have gone about procuring various supplies for the life they are living here. I'm going to skip over those, but they are in the book if you would like to know that sort of information. Hig had a wife named Melissa who died from the outbreak. He has a lot of grief over that, especially because in the end, she asked Hig to put her out of her misery by using a pillow. And he did. In the present timeline, Hig has a dog named Jasper, whom he keeps close to him because he loves him to bits. That's his best friend and companion. He isn't keeping track of Jasper's age, but he's definitely had him for a few years. And if you're wondering if this is going where you think it's going, unfortunately, yes. He also keeps Jasper close to him because, in addition to worrying that one day Bangley's going to just decide he's hit his limit and will kill Hig, Hig is also worried that he's going to do the same to Jasper if he leaves Jasper alone with Bangley. I share that point because I find it peculiar that they try to act like Bangley's not that bad, and deep down he's an alright fellow, and they've become like family. They act like that at the end of Act 1 and Act 3. It doesn't feel earned from where I'm at, but anyway. At the end of Act 1, Hig is up in the mountains. He likes to go there sometimes just to go fishing and try to feel a bit more peace, or at least as much as is possible anyway, under the traumatic circumstances. Jasper is with him, and late one night, Jasper passes away from what I interpreted to be a combination of old age and also the fact that it got cold that night. Oh my god! Hig realizing that Jasper died is the very end of Act 1. Act 2 begins with Hig spiraling. He's practically in a trance going through the motions the next couple of days because of how overcome with grief he is because of Jasper's death. Eventually, Hig comes down the mountain and Bangley radios him to warn him that some random armed people are hunting Hig. Long story short, Hig is able to get to a spot and hide under Bangley's advice of where he needs to hide and shoot at these men. And Bangley also unveils a giant weapon that is extremely powerful, which he uses to shoot a good amount of the rest of the men. If there are any survivors, they scurry off because this is a losing fight. I didn't take detailed notes while reading this book until we got further into Act 2 because Act 1 felt like it had a lot of filler. It's not filler in the traditional sense, but like I said, the style of writing includes a lot of wandering thoughts, so it was difficult to ascertain which parts actually mattered enough to document so as to be able to share in a YouTube video presenting an overview of what the story is. Hig decides to fly towards an airport tower that 3 years prior had actually responded to a call that Hig had been calling out on his plane radio. I'm probably not using the correct verbiage of aviation tools, but I'm going to assume that you have enough critical thinking skills to know what I'm referring to regardless. It had been a man's voice, and Hig is intrigued by the idea of there being survivors elsewhere that might be friendly, people he could socialize with. Essentially, he feels like he's lost his reason for living. The only other people he has been able to socialize with is a group of Mennonites. They have their own spot set up and they're all sick from the outbreak. Hig will fly over and visit them, and they have a specific flag they will put up if they need his help with something, and when that happens, he will come and land his plane and help them with whatever the technical issue is. Hig used to work on building houses before the apocalypse, so he tends to be able to help out in a variety of ways that are related to those skills. Before flying off in the direction of the broadcast transmission tower that he had received the signal from 3 years prior, he asks Bangley to look after the crops that Hig is usually the one to take care of. Give them water, get rid of the weeds. While flying over this one spot he's never flown over before on his way to this airport, he's surprised to find that there's a really beautiful patch of green, there's cattle, the garden appears to be thriving, at least by post-apocalyptic standards. It's definitely in better condition than his own crops he was growing back by the airport hangar where he and Bangley lived. He also sees a woman there with an older man. The man shoots at Hig's plane and actually manages to hit it where one of the windows on the left side is now gone, and Hig is bleeding. Not a mortal wound by any means, but Hig needs to land quickly. What you eventually learn is that this duo he's discovered is an adult woman and her older father. She goes by the name Sima, who is played by Margaret Qualley in the film, and her father is only ever referred to as Pops. At the time of me recording this video, there is limited information about the cast. Only 5 names are shown, 2 of which don't have their character names announced. That being said, Guy Pearce, the diva himself, Guy Pearce, is one of those 5 names, and I am speculating that he will play Pops. It just makes sense. Out of these 5 names in the cast, Guy Pearce is by far the one that calls my attention the most. Hig lands the plane and ends up further out, and he makes his way back, closer to where Sima and Pops are. Pops almost successfully shoots Hig again. Hig ends up using a stick and some extra paper that he has to write words, and he hangs the paper down so that he can communicate with them. His opening line is, "I am not a pheasant." Okay, that could be funny on film. Ridley Scott is hilarious. None of your favorite newer filmmakers have quotes as funny as Ridley Scott. His movies will be categorized as dramas, but I inevitably find something funny to add to my clip folders.
Ferre, Armani, and Versace.
Come in. Take your pants off. Our friendship is built on our mutual distrust of England.
Now, Pops could have executed Hig, but you find out later that the reason why he let Hig live and took that chance is that he looked at Hig and judged him to be weak. And by weak, I mean that he might not be a threat. Pops and Sima had a contingency plan in place where if they were to ever be attacked by outsiders, Pops would execute Sima and then himself to spare the 2 of them from whatever horrific thing newcomer invaders could be bringing. Once Pops judged Hig to possibly be non-threatening, he gave Sima one of his weapons and proceeded to go towards the direction that Hig is coming from, since by that point they had agreed to let him come over and meet them without Pops executing him at the first opportunity. And they figured that if Hig were to kill Pops, Sima would be able to go gently into the night without having to experience whatever horrors Hig might inflict. Hig's not that type of person, but at the time, they didn't know that. You don't find out Sima and Pops' point of view of that encounter until a bit further into the story, but I'm merely making it easier for you to understand what's really going on here and the full picture of these characters and what their motivations are. One of the other reasons why Sima and Pops are open to trying to give Hig a chance is because they need him. Again, it takes a while for this information to be revealed, but there is a drought. Right now things are okay, but each year the weather has been getting warmer. The summer before, the creek almost dried up completely and half their cattle died as a result. Simma and Pops already knew that they were going to have to leave this place soon, and they were thinking that they would leave in the spring. With Hig there, well, he has a plane, and that's a way out. Simma also has a medical background. She's a doctor. Initially, she says she was an internist working in public health, but then she immediately follows up by saying that she was working in epidemiology. Eventually, Hig and Simma start to grow closer, and they begin some sort of relationship, but things are moving slowly in the sense that the first time they hook up, she starts pulling away from Hig the day after because she had a nightmare about her dead husband. She holds a lot of guilt over her dead husband dying during the outbreak, and she wasn't there with him at the time because she had been with her mother, Pops' wife, who was also dying from the outbreak. Simma had also gotten sick, but she survived. There's some sort of immunity she inherited from her father, Pops, but being sick wreaked a lot of havoc on her. She has a type of fibromyalgia, and after getting sick from the outbreak, her blood vessels were damaged, so now she bruises very easily. Among other things, this means that whenever she and Hig get intimate, they have to be extremely careful. Simma estimates that she's not going to live past the age of 50 or 55 because of the damage to her organs by the fever. Now, the whole plan for Hig to fly them out of there is complicated by the fact that he only has a limited amount of fuel when he lands there. He flew past the point of no return and found them by accident. He can make it to the airport that he was already planning to go to, but he cannot do that if he's also flying both of them. He does the calculations for the amount of fuel he has, the distance of the trip, how much different items and they as people will weigh, and he comes to the realization that he can only fly one of them. Another variable he has to consider is that Simma wants to bring 2 baby lambs with her, 1 girl and 1 boy. Hig is hesitant about telling Pops that the plane cannot carry all of their weight, so he just brings Pops a paper with all of the numbers on them and some formulas, and lets Pops crunch the numbers himself. He'll answer questions, and Pops comes to the same conclusion, and he also determines that Hig already knew this. However, there is a sweet moment, or at least sweet by this book's standards, where Hig says that he'll be able to fly all 3 of them back to the hangar once they've been able to refuel. So the plan they land on is that Hig, Simma, the 2 lambs, plus a couple of other supplies, will fly to the airport where Hig had heard the response from 3 years ago. There, he will be able to refuel and get the answers to the question of who it was that spoke to him. Pops will leave a day early to walk to the airport and meet them there. And it seems as though Pops maybe didn't expect for Hig to take that extra step of still trying to include Pops in the journey back to the airport hangar. Maybe Pops had already, in his own mind, made peace with the idea of just staying and dying on his own land with his remaining animals, that they could all go out together. Act 3 is after the plan has been made, but there's more time of Hig just being with them and living this life with Simma and Pops. This is when the flirtation between Hig and Simma really kicks up and they get intimate.
Intimate? Is that how old people say sex?
To give you an idea of how disorienting the book's meandering writing style can be, I thought that Hig's time away of leaving the airport hangar, crash landing at this spot where Simma and Pops are set up, and then spending time living there with them before they eventually take flight and head to that other airport to get fuel for the plane, I thought that that took months. Do you hear me? Months. I thought this took months. In actuality, about 6 weeks. I don't expect a Ridley Scott movie to have pacing that feels like that, which is one of several reasons why I'm presuming his adaptation will have a fair few changes made to make the story his own. Hig and Simma open up more to one another, and Pops knows that there's something growing between them, but despite the really intense, violent reaction he had to Hig's arrival when it wasn't clear whether or not he was a threatening intruder, Pops doesn't do the cliched, overprotective reaction of threatening Hig. He tells Hig that he's never been that type of parent, so there's no threatening speech there. Pops leaves for the airport a day early before Hig and Simma fly out with the 2 baby lambs. It's a rough takeoff, but they manage to get into the air. When they fly over a town that's on the way to this other airport, Simma throws up out the window because the town is completely destroyed and burned, and there are skeletal remains, among other things, all over the place. And Simma is particularly disturbed by this because that's the town where she used to live. She and Pops had left the town to go live out in nature before things got as bad as they did with everything happening with the outbreak. Higgs radios into the airport and gets a response, but this time it's a woman's voice. He has a bad feeling as he gets closer to the airport, and it's as if he can hear Bangley's voice in his mind warning him. And that's happening because it's the result of all of the times he and Bangley have engaged in violent encounters with random people showing up and encroaching on the area that they had claimed as theirs. At the last minute, Hig pulls the plane up right before he was going to land, and he narrowly misses a cable that was just sprung up to try to hit the wheels and cause the plane to crash. He's able to land safely because Pops was already there at this airport and provides cover for him with gunfire. Also, Hig has to land anyway because he's out of fuel by this point. Hig is furious because there are other planes there that have clearly been crashed using this same cable trap that almost got him, after which any disoriented survivors emerging from those planes have been gunned down. All those years he was holding on to hope because of that response on the radio, and it was a trap. Sima is really devastated by the back-to-back hits of seeing the destroyed town and now this violent encounter at the airport, so she stays inside the plane with a gun they left her with for protection, and then Hig and Pops decide to go after whomever is doing this. Pops goes inside first, shoots, and then calls Hig inside, letting him know that he has shot the person who had been shooting at them. They have to go up multiple floors to be able to reach them, and it turns out to be an old man named Samuel who has been mortally wounded from Pops' shot. The woman on the radio is an old woman who is presumably Samuel's wife. So the two of them have been holed up in this airport, and not only are they shooting at anyone that comes near where they're set up, which isn't all that different from what we've seen Hig and Bangley do or Sima and Pops do, but these two have been deliberately luring people in to execute them, so that's why they're regarded as the supervillains that you know for all of 5 seconds before they're killed off in the book. Pops executes both of them, but he interrogates Samuel before making that final shot because he needs to know where the fuel is for Higgs' plane, how the cable was sprung, and which key is the key they will need to use from Samuel's key ring. They get the fuel and head back to the airport hangar where Hig was living with Bangley, but when they get there, they find that various houses in the area are now charred, and one half of the hangar has been ripped open as if by a tornado and burned. They go into the house where Bangley was living and discover that he's alive, albeit badly wounded. He had been attacked by a group of strangers, but successfully fought them off. If they hadn't found him, though, he probably would have not survived. They need Sima to treat him in order for him to survive, which she does. She nurses him back to health. Bangley and Pops end up getting along well. Hig brings Sima to meet the Mennonites, and she gets to work on providing them with medical treatment and advice. She also tells Hig that the disease is not passed on just by close physical proximity. It requires an exchange of bodily fluids or blood. So this means that Hig doesn't have to stay extremely far away from these people, which is what he had mostly been doing before. And he ponders about how this disease that's making them sick had actually kept them alive in a way because they have put up various signs to warn outsiders that they're all sick, and any potential intruders who might spy on them through rifle scopes or binoculars or just get close enough to eavesdrop would be able to look at these people and know that they're infected. So those people would just avoid them altogether. Sima becomes rejuvenated from being able to start anew with Hig. She feels lighter now, probably from a combination of things, surviving yet another near-death experience, being able to help patients again, be around children on a semi-regular basis, so it makes her romance with Hig more secure than it was before. And that's more or less the story of the Dog Stars. If you really distill the story down to just the main plot beats, you will see that it's a very simple plot. Living in the apocalypse, dog dies, grief-stricken in search of something to live for, stumbles across a woman and her father, they need to leave there, okay, but we need gas at the airport I was already flying towards, oh no, it's a trap, pew pew, fuel up, go home, save my violent roommate from the brink of death, visit the Mennonites, and show them your new lady love, the end. A couple additional things. One of Hig's memories reveals that the first date he ever went on was to go to the cinema to see Avatar in 3D. Now hold on. Just a moment. That was the first moment that my attention really perked up, and I thought, okay, maybe he's cool.
Stupid. Ignorant like a child.
Up until that point, the book was really coming across like something that would predominantly appeal to sensitive, solitary men who live in the woods and like to fish. No disrespect to that lifestyle. I would rather you fish and feed yourself with that instead of paying into the commercial fishing industrial complex that is wreaking havoc on the ocean environment and its wildlife. How many whales and dolphins are going to die from being entangled in corporate fishing nets until people decide that enough is enough? One man fishing and feeding himself and his dog one fish at a time, that's the way nature intended it. But anyway, the other excerpt from his reminiscing about his first date is when he's thinking about how he was so nervous to be on this date that he didn't even kiss her, even though she probably wanted him to. My first realization that someone else might be anxious for my approval, that they could be scared of me. Before the end of the world, that was a profound insight. Now, I pretty much took it for granted. Everybody was scared of me, which is a weird way to head out on a date. Poor Hig. Poor Frankenstein. And when I read that so close to the Avatar name drop, I thought to myself, are you having a laugh? You must be joking. Jacob Elordi is playing this character, Frankenstein's monster himself. By the way, for anyone who doesn't know this, I just reread Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and I talked about that over on my Patreon. Every month I do a what I watched and read episode. It used to just be what I watched, but I've now expanded it to include whatever I'm reading, and my 2025 reading list is also published on there, so you can see what I've read, which of those books I liked the most, and we're also doing monthly reactions to My Lady Jane right now, which is fun to revisit. But now back to The Dog Stars. In reading the book, I got the impression that Hig was much older. Not older as in an old character, but definitely older than Jacob Elordi. Jacob Elordi isn't even 30 yet, but I got the impression that Hig was supposed to be in his 40s. I might be misremembering that, and I needed to finish this video now because of how many other videos I'm already working on that I need to publish this month or at a particular time. But all that to say, I might reread this book closer to the film's theatrical release, which is March 27th, as I already said, but Ridley Scott's vibe being what it is, I am assuming he's going to make the story his own, so I don't think that every precise detail of the source material is important for me to have perfectly memorized before watching the adaptation. I think Ridley will add more drama, more action, and more dry humor. In general, Ridley doesn't really seem to make low-budget films, especially at this point in his career, so I think that it's going to be visually elevated and more grandiose than how the world looked in my mind when I was reading the book. Thematically, when I reflect on films like House of Gucci and Napoleon, where there was a really clear message being communicated about how the pursuit of power and maintaining power for the sake of it is the path to one's misery and self-destruction. I think that there are ideas in the book that Ridley could make more blatant that would align nicely with what he has been saying in more of his recent works. You have the couple at the airport, or even Bangley, who doesn't really strike me as being particularly loving towards humanity as a whole. They're people that are especially prone to excessive violence. Those things are intertwined. But the true meaning in life is love, and that's what the book is seemingly showing. Love between a father and daughter, the love you have for your fur baby, the new love that blossoms between Hig and Sima. I've distilled the story down to focus on that, and I wouldn't be surprised if Ridley keeps that or amplifies it in his version. Again, I don't want to sound like I'm harping on this too much, but the writing style of the book definitely came across as meandering. I know that it wasn't intended that way. There's a lot of intention to building Hig's story and sharing so many details of his life, but the methodology of delivering that information, I would go so far as to say that it could be disastrous if you attempted to copy and paste the information into the film in that way. You have to rearrange things and make the information flow in a way that would keep your audience engaged, and as I've already said, what works in print doesn't necessarily work in a film. But for now, all I need to know is that it's a Ridley Scott film, he's never boring, he delivers the drama, and he delivers hilarious quotes on all his press tours, so I'm ready to hear what sort of mad energy he'll be giving us. And Guy Pearce, also fabulous. I really hope they will develop Pops further if that is who he's playing. Give Guy more to chew on and play on screen, because I'm already seated. The ticket has been pre-ordered.